We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.
It is the morning of multitasking, and the sticking fingers in the cracks in the Dike from Hell. Dike from Hell takes on a very different tone in the 21st century, doesn't it? Now, that could be even considered hate speech in some circles. I'm Robert Phoenix, and you are you, and you are now listening to the Friday Farcast. It is the 7th of June, 2013, and we are going to have a rip-roaring show today. It's going to be amazing. In the first half hour, first Friday, always thrilled and honored to bring Sarah Nash, the Cosmic Hooker, onto the proceedings for 30 minutes of wonderful, scintillating conversation, banter, and wit. And then in the second part of the show, I'm going to be bringing on Rad Chick from Michigan, who is all about all things radioactive and isotopic. And we're going to talk about Fukushima, and we're going to talk about a lot of other stuff, particularly bioremediation and the role that cannabis and hemp plays in bioremediating the environment when it becomes contaminated with radioactivity. We're going to get into that. And the third guest of the day is going to be John Trudell. We'll have him on, and we'll have Radchick on simultaneously, and they'll be jamming on their hempalicious suggestions and solutions to live in a polluted and toxified world. So, sounds like a good show, doesn't it? And then I'm going to get into John and the latest updates from the Hempsteadheart project. And today is National Hemp Week, so we have a lot to talk about. All right, let me do this. Let me bring on my friend here, my good friend, Sarah Nash, Cosmic Hooker. Let's get caught up with what's in her world.
Hola, ¿qué pasa? Oh my gosh, I'm running around. Talk about multitasking. Oh, I still haven't packed.
It's Mars and Gemini, Sarah. That's what it is.
Oh man, oh man, oh man. Like I just revealed the Leah Rose Love website. Who is Leah Rose? And we're trying to start this radical marketing campaign for the White Light Express, so we can really ramp up some interest with that. And oh man, it's just like exploding in my face in a really good way. But I'm like, you know what? I procrastinate with my procrastination.
Yeah, sometimes things can explode in your face in a really good way. And obviously I'm talking about a bottle of champagne, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, this is a family-friendly site. Come on.
Yes, and a family-friendly show. So So what's going on with you? What's happening in your world?
We're leaving as soon as I get off the phone with you. Well, that's what I'm telling my sister, but we're leaving for this epic road trip through Sedona, the Grand Canyon, and Joshua Tree. We've been invited to have Leah Rose, the quartz crystal skull, sit in a circle at Angel Valley in Sedona to be activated by some really other amazing crystal skulls. And so I've been doing a lot of research about quartz crystal and what it's used for in science, and trying to get this website put together because we're just going to start sharing the White Light Express with as many people as we possibly can. It's good stuff, man. It's good stuff. And it's like, I have to remember I'm a role model. I don't feel tardy.
Well, maybe you're a crescent role model. Maybe that's what it is.
Oh, light and fluffy.
Light and fluffy.
Many layers.
Many layers, light and fluffy, and resembling the shape or a phase of the moon. What do you think?
I like it. Oh, I like it. You are so clever. You're awesome. Well done.
You know, I've been watching. I've been so. I stayed away from Mad Men for a long time because I knew this would happen. I knew that once I started watching Mad Men on Netflix, that I would become obsessed. And so I'm up to season 5 now, or approaching season 6, getting current, and watching these guys on Madison Avenue and looking at them, and I'm pretty sure that I could have made a pretty decent living being an advertising agent or a creative guy in advertising.
Oh, without a doubt, absolutely, and you probably were. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, we can do a session on that later if you want to.
Well,
but
such a century phenomenon. You know, the only other chance I may have had at it was being maybe a propaganda minister for Hitler during World War II. Maybe that was it.
Well, you could have been Rasputin too. I mean, there's so much out there. But past life regressions are one of my gigs. I had the opportunity to sit with Dick Sutphin the last time I was in Sedona a month ago.
Yep.
And wow. And here's the thing, when I first was regressed when I was 20, I did not believe past lives. A lot of people know that I grew up a Mormon. I knew that there was a pre-existence, but I don't know. Past lives just seemed so odd to me, and I figured that we had genetic memory wrapped up within our DNA, and that we were able to access it sort of like a codex or Rolodex of experience. And so I had lots of logical and rational explanations beyond, I lived a million lives, until I was regressed the first time, because there's no way I could have made up the things that I saw. And so now I know that past lives do exist, and they're a very real part of who we are and why we are. 99.9% of our issues are as a result of past lives. And that's what spiritual response therapy does. It helps you with that. But let's talk about movies again. Let's talk about Mad Men. I am so into Game of Thrones. Oh, have you watched it?
I had a feeling we would talk about this. Believe it or not, I had a precognitive deja vu moment about you and I talking about Game of Thrones, and this was a couple of days ago. And no, the answer is no, and the reason the answer is no is because I'm too cheap to have HBO.
That's all right. No, I totally understand that. I totally grok that because it's available. It'll be available on disc. When you have the opportunity to watch it, you have to. The first time I watched it, my daughter, I had my shoulder surgery on my left shoulder, and I was down for the count for months, and so my daughter sat down with me in the living room one afternoon, and she's like, just watch the first one, Mom. Just watch the first one. And I'm like, oh, fine, whatever. I was under the influence of drugs, and really good ones, too. And legal drugs. Pot's legal now too.
It is in your state.
I sat there and I watched the first one, and that was it, man. I was gone. I was gone. It is so well done and so radical and beautiful and heinous. And I know that so many people, this if you haven't seen it, so you don't know, but those who do know.
I saw one episode when I had free HBO one weekend. So I did see it. I saw the sets. I saw the dialogue. I saw the actors. I mean, I could absolutely tell it would be something I'd get utterly hooked on. So
yeah, and the chaos, death, the mayhem. I mean, every time you think something awesome is happening, or it's. I mean, here's what you have to do when you watch Game of Thrones. Now I've kind of figured it out. If you really fall in love with a character, expect that character to die probably within, I don't know, minutes. Sort of like Stephen King, you know, he develops these amazing characters and then they're gone. Gone.
Right. So what is the meta meaning of it all?
Basically, it's getting us in touch with alternate realities and alternate dimensions.
Right.
And this guy was able, sort of like J.R.R. Tolkien.
Tolkien. We just call him Tolkien.
Yeah. He was able to tap into a different dimension, a different reality. And if anybody's ever read Beyond the Lord of the Rings trilogy and read his Silmarillion, it's a phenomenal accounting of an alternate dimension and perhaps how the Earth was once upon a time. So I think what's happening with Game of Thrones is that it's tapping into a collective consciousness that we have as a species of humans in a different dimension. Because they say that if the human mind can conceive of it, it is possible and probable.
Right.
All the talk of dragons and, oh my God, you know, Game of Thrones has zombies.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. The zombies have permeated everything, right? And they're everywhere. I bet you have zombies listening to this broadcast right now.
Why do you think that there's all these movies coming out recently with regard to supernatural and paranormal occurrences, more so than ever before? I mean, we've always had a fascination with, you know, Frankenstein, Dracula, fairies, those kinds of things, but now they're really pulling it into mainstream. I mean, look at True Blood.
Yeah,
Dead.
I think that they're, well, first of all, I don't know if you have noticed the films that are coming out in June, but it's pure doom porn all across June. You have a movie called The Purge coming out starring Ethan Hawke. It's kind of this futuristic movie about how everything is really good in America. Everybody's got money, everybody's employed, everybody's living the good life, except for one night of the year where you can do anything you want and get away with it, and it's kind of like their social catharsis. So we have The Purge coming out this month. We have After Earth, which just came out on the 31st. We have another comedy, sort of dark comedy, black comedy called This Is the End, about the world. Planet Z comes out in June. There's a comedy about the Rapture called Rapture Palooza. I mean, these are all coming out in June. It's really fascinating how all this doom porn is coming. And then you have also the movie about White House Down with or something like that with Jamie Foxx as the president and Channing Tatum.
Oh, right, yeah.
That's coming out in June. So June is a really interesting month as it relates to reinforcing in people's minds that, you know, shit is going down and the end is near. I mean, if you wanted to bump into a movie anywhere at a cinema near you, you're going to get that kind of messaging. I think in the bigger picture, why we're getting more and more of it, on an astrological level, Pluto and Scorpio, their generation is the second largest generation in terms of numbers since the baby boomers. And Pluto and Scorpio have very distinct cultural preferences, and they revolve around really dark stuff. So zombies, vampires,
and sex with that really dark stuff too.
Sex, necrophilia. I mean, mixing all kinds of, weird drug concoctions into a drink. Everything like, MD, 40/40, the cough syrup, with vodka, with 7-Up, with Gatorade. They just put that stuff, drink it down. So they're a big number. They're a big demographic. They respond to the media and the art. So if you're a movie studio, why wouldn't you create that kind of movie and art based on this demographic that really laps it up? I mean, they are not aware. When I say they, I'm talking about the cultural movers and shakers, the media giants. They are not unaware of astrology. I've written about this on my website. Generationally, each generation has its own astrological kind of, for lack of a better term, meme that drives our psyche and our consciousness. For you and I, Sarah, that is Mary Poppins. That's our
absolutely
generational meme, which is we've got duality. We've got this woman who by day is a nanny, helping, serving, Pluto and Virgo, right, by night. She's a witch, Neptune and Scorpio. There's a whole underworld current, undercurrent, and so that's kind of our meme. And so for the Pluto and Scorpio kids, their meme is obviously True Blood, and then also Harry Potter. Those are their two main movers and shakers. So I think that there's some resonance around this based on just kind of the, for lack of a better term, astromatrix, and also there's very, very significant and shrewd marketing and film production. But the final piece is that I also think that we're in a very fascinating time in terms of the indoctrination of occult and esoteric principles into the collective. And there are two sources that talk about this. The first one, obviously, is Alice Bailey and Helena Blavatsky primarily, and they call this the externalization of the hierarchy. And this is when a period when the hierarchy begins to make itself known through the importation of symbols and occult practices across the board, across the media. There's another.
Well, with regard to that hierarchy, though, let's remember where that hierarchy is coming in. Edgar Cayce spoke of the fifth root race, and,
right.
And these crystals and these indigos that are coming in now, and they've had it with the I don't know, with that charade that the media has played, and they want to rule it and own it. Now, I mean, without going into a lot of detail, I can say that a couple of my very best clients are pretty decent movers and shakers in the media scene. Okay, These are people who write scripts. These are people who create movies and who are actually in movies, a couple of them. And, they come to me, and sometimes, I get to know a little bit more about what's happening out there. And the fact that, my dad was a producer, too. I just, I sort of have this background in Hollywood and how it happens. I mean, sometimes you think there's this huge dart on a wall, a dartboard, and they spin it and they throw darts at it. Okay, here's nuns on the moon driving a Chevy. Okay, boom, let's create a movie. But that's not what's happening now. What's happening now is that these kids are growing up, and they're coming out with these memories, speaking of past lives, and they have a greater handle on the possibilities that are out there because they want to break through the programming, no pun intended, that was handed down before them. They want to break through that. They want to show us the possibilities because they know it exists.
I think that there's probably some truth to that. But at the end of the day, I also think that they're not the ones that are greenlighting these projects. I mean, the people that are greenlighting the projects are probably in their 50s and their 60s. They're the ones that are holding the purse strings and the money. They run the studios. 25, 30-year-old is not going to run a studio at this point in time. So I also think that there is Look, I think you and I may fundamentally disagree at some level about intent. And I do think that there is, at a high level, a darker intent that's being used right now to manipulate consciousness through the media.
Oh, no, I'm not going to disagree with you at all. In fact, I 100% agree with you. And that's why my work with the White Light Express, and it's exactly what I told George and what I preach out there, is that we must rally together, because it is that darkness. It's very, very real. It's incredibly real, and part of the agenda, and that's why they come to me, Robert. That's why I get, my phone rings off the hook sometimes with these people in media who are saying, should I do this? Should I do that? What's going to happen if I show the world this? No, there's a huge battle going on out there. There's no doubt in my mind that the agenda is darkness. But we have to remember, and this is where we do, I think, kind of clash. I also believe that, the Illuminati, the so-called Illuminati, there are good ones out there just as much as there are bad ones. And I really don't want to step into those labels, but they're there. The bottom line is that behind the scenes, it's a universal battle. I mean, it's not just here on Earth; it's happening all over the universe.
Yeah, I agree with
that. I just stumbled across this website. Somebody sent it to me on the White Light Express. They said, "Sarah, you need to go check out Silver Legion." And I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "Just Google it." And I did, and I went down a rabbit hole that just blew me away. And it confirmed a lot of my beliefs that, we in our astral selves, I mean, these bodies that we inhabit right now, these flesh vehicles, they're just avatars. Mm-hmm. And we, some of us, a great many of us here on Earth are trapped. Well, if you get into the Urantia teachings, but then that goes way out there. But essentially, I think what's happening is with these movies and with media and the things that they're putting out there, it's a not so subtle battle anymore that's being blasted to us in the form of entertainment.
Yeah,
it's like, hey, you get to watch this, but it's really happening.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think that there are factions that are out there, clashing and have been clashing throughout time, throughout culture. There's the Sons of Belial, there's the Law of One, there's the Orions, there's the Syrians. One group thinks that mankind can't wipe its own ass. Another group thinks that mankind is more than capable of doing it and wants to give them, the keys to the family car. And I do think that these two groups, bounce off against one another, and you can see it in certain films. It's, some of these secrets are being revealed and shown to us. And I do believe also it's a galactic, battle and war and interdimensional. I mean, right now I think what we're dealing with, and I talked to Jay about this, is this parasitic consciousness that has inhabited our world and wants to devour everything, and then move on to another world and devour the next one. And right now they're using Goldman Sachs on the financial side, and they're using Monsanto on the genetically modified food side to go about their business and do exactly what I'm talking about. And this wheat thing is a very serious issue, because if the entire, and there's no if, it's just a matter of when. It's a matter of when this genetically modified wheat will spread throughout the country. It's a really bad deal, really bad, because then it infiltrates everything. And wheat is already,
and it made me incredibly sick. I was really, really healthy, and then I started, and you and I talked about this, and I'm still coming to terms with it, but the lesions all over my body and the things that happened to me, I began thinking that, it's Morgellons, it's this, it's that, and I'm still not entirely certain that the hell that I went through, and I'm still going through at a very small level now because I've completely removed wheat and gluten from my body. It's devastating. It's absolutely devastating. They are attacking us at a cellular level.
Absolutely.
And they're eating our minds, the chemtrails. I mean, people just go, oh, that doesn't exist. They wouldn't do that. Oh, hell yeah, they do.
Yeah, no, yeah, totally. I mean, I felt like I was dying about 2 years ago,
Oh,
and
me too.
I was having, fairly classic Morgellon-like symptoms, and I don't give a shit. I'll talk about it, and it was really, it was not good, and I was afraid of eating. I mean, that's how bad it was. It was like, okay, I'm going to eat, I'm going to get sick, and then one day, the light just went off in my head. It was just like, stop eating wheat, Robert. And I was like, okay. So I stopped. I got rid of the gluten. Within 2 weeks, I could sleep. My body functions were returning to normal. My skin started to have some color again. And after that, Sarah, I haven't looked back, and my health has been way more robust. So I feel you, sister, and I'm glad you got there.
Well, and I have to, give you a huge shout out. I mean, when I started telling you what was happening with me, you just put it in my face, and I had to really take a step back and look at it, because other people had been saying it too. But I trust you a little bit more. And I know it's going to piss off a few people who are listening, but who cares? Go to Robert Phoenix, trust him. He'll tell you the truth, and then come to me. But yeah, no, you really put it in my face, and I was actually able to sit down with my physicians, and luckily I live in an area where they're not just going to look at me and put me in a mental institution, but I was able to find physicians that I could sit down with and say, listen, could it be this, could it be that? And then, finally, one said, this is a, you don't have celiac disease. What is that, celiac disease?
Celiac, that's right.
You've got a serious issue with yeast and wheat and gluten. Dude, I grew up in Utah and Colorado eating fresh milk, fresh eggs, fresh food constantly. And so I never had any of those issues. I had some, like I would get like odd hives and stuff like that, but that's because I'm also allergic to anything with a nightshade, like potatoes or tomatoes. And that's a common allergy.
You're a classic O blood type.
Yeah, and this wheat thing though, my God, once you said, Sarah, knock it off with the wheat, seriously, just remove it from your world. Not only did I have to remove wheat though, I had to really go with organic corn. Because that corn, it'll kill you. Yeah. I mean, forget eating Fritos or Bugles. Forget it.
Well, the good news is that once you kind of wake up to the food crisis that we're experiencing, then all of a sudden you start to eat at home more, because eating out is just not tenable most of the time for most of us. And you get to control the quality of your food, and you get to get into cooking. It slows your life down a little bit, and it brings in a whole different kind of level of consciousness when you begin to interact with your diet in a really focused and alive kind of way.
Well, and I think too, there's this whole thing, and I have empathy and compassion, because it's so much easier to stay asleep. I mean, once you wake up and you look around you, and it's sort of like Neo with the Matrix, and suddenly realizing that everything is an illusion. And it's so much easier to sit back and say, oh no, they don't want to kill us. This is okay. It's going to be all right, and then we have these little subtle innuendos in movies and stuff, and they inundate us over and over and over again to keep us hypnotized.
Yeah.
And then disinformation. I mean, it's the more and more I become aware, and the more awake I become, and the more alert I become, the more terrified I am, and yet still, and you know me, I got to the point where I was like, fuck this. I got angry. When my body started shutting down and I had adrenal fatigue, not failure because I'd be dead, but my adrenals completely shut down, and I had, these horrible, horrible lesions. I got angry, and you were like, remember, you were like, good, now you're angry, do something about it.
Right. Well, you're right. And I think what happens is with people, Sarah, I think you bring up a great point around this whole, deniability. and I think people think that at some point the parents are going to show up, right? Oh, the parents are going to show up and make everything okay. The grown-ups are going to come in and straighten this all out. You know, mom and dad, or somebody else's mom and dad, or the teacher.
Or no, my big brother Jesus Christ. My big brother Jesus Christ is coming.
Whatever
and he's
it is,
going to make it A-okay.
The grown-up is going to come in and change it. Jesus may be the ecclesiastical version. Mom and dad might be the atheist version, right? I mean, so at some point, that's what people are holding out for. And what's happening is that at least on a mass level, that's not happening. Now, behind the scenes, there's some interesting things taking place. Like, for instance, this revelation that the NSA is listening to everything that we're talking about, including this now, and that they've been colluding with Verizon since 2001. We knew that because we knew what was happening. This is coming out now, and this is starting to be a pretty serious charge. And people, you know, even the people that have been so entrenched in the mythology of Barack Obama, they're having a hard time now dealing with what's coming out. And
I am.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this impacts people if they're going to just stand by and say, you know, look, you guys are all up in our affairs all the time. This is not what this was supposed to be about.
No, it's not. And part of the Republican agenda, and I know only because of being intimately involved with just that side of the party, is that a lot of them will sit back, and these aren't people who are in power, but a lot of them will sit back and say, I don't have anything to hide. Go ahead, you can look at my stuff. And that's what they're putting out there. I don't have anything to hide. Go ahead, look at my stuff. Well, if you're angry and you don't want somebody peeking, you know, at your history, then you must have something to hide. That's not the point.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I understand that.
I don't think the Republicans have a patent or copyright on that stance. I think it's a cross-platform stance. I think they're equally culpable. In fact, the former national security spokesperson, the equivalent of Jay Carney in the Obama administration, Tommy Vitor, who is obviously a Democrat, came out today blasting people about why they should fear their lack of privacy. I mean, he was basically trying to shame people into letting go of this kind of fundamental right that, you know, we've all taken for granted for such a long period of time. I don't think it's a bipartisan. I think both parties are equally culpable. And frankly, Obama had two really solid years from 2008 to 2010 when he had a Democratic Congress and a Democratic Senate, and the Patriot Act was up for review. He could have made drastic changes. He could have killed it, but that's not what's going on here. What's going on is there's a huge amount of money in surveillance. It is the economy right now.
Yeah.
It's enormous amounts of money, and that money is being funneled through the Department of Homeland Security to all of these kind of octopus tentacles of the security and the surveillance industry, which, by the way, originates mostly out of Israel, okay? I'm just stating the fact. I'm not being anti-Semitic. I'm not being hateful. You can look it up on the internet. They are the ones that are running most of the security programs in this country and around the world, okay? So this is where the money's going. This is the big industry. People are getting filthy rich spying off of other people or spying on other people. And that's a whole other side of this that people don't quite understand right now.
Well, and just to bring this all back into, you know, a full circle sort of thing, my road trip with my sister as we take Leah Rose, the Crystal Skull, out and about, you know, I have sat for a very, very long time, just as you have, and you're doing it your way, I'm doing it my way, but I really want to find a way to reach out to people in a manner that will offer them the opportunity to wake up. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it starts with a simple fascination, like, wow, crystals. Okay, a crystal skull. Hey, that's a little weird. That's a little strange. I'm going to go look that up. I'm going to go read about it. And then they become more and more aware. They become more and more educated, hopefully, within their own personal spirituality, and they find that they are the game masters. Eventually, they get to the point where they realize that they are in control. And I think that, the darker sides, the darker forces, whatever you want to call it, the more they keep us asleep, the more they keep us wrapped up in the cotton wool of lies and deceit, the bigger their chances of actually winning this battle. So we each have a responsibility in our own way to go out and help others wake up. Now, I often said that I wanted to reach all the people of Walmart, so to speak, and it's one of the reasons that I called myself the cosmic hooker as opposed to, interstellar galactic cosmic rainbow angel. I wanted to reach out to people who otherwise might not be open to receiving spiritual information. And so that's why we're taking Leah Rose on the road. We want to tell people about the White Light Express conference happening in Port Townsend this August. George Norrie's coming. And, the Mystic Healer, Sonia Grace, will be there. She's teaching everybody about the future you. I'm giving a workshop, and then Peter is giving a workshop for the highly sensitive man. So it's going to be a really awesome gathering. My goal, like I said, is just to be able to reach out to people and, allow them the opportunity to be skeptical but to listen. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe Robert Phoenix. You don't have to believe Sonia or George or anybody, but just listen. Give yourself the opportunity to be open.
Yeah, I disagree with that slightly. I think they need to believe me. Everybody else, I don't know about.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? I'm gonna give you that one because you helped me. So yeah, you get that one.
Sarah, I just want to say, this is a really great event, and going to Washington, especially in that area, is a vacation in and of itself. Especially that time of year, it's a can't miss experience from the location alone. And you're going to go up there, you're going to hang with Sarah and her crew and George Norrie. So I highly recommend people check this out and go to your website, right?
Yeah, you can go to leahroselove.com. You can go to the White Light Express. You can go to the Facebook page. It's all over the place. The information is there. If you're interested, it's all a simple Google, White Light Express. But yeah, it's whitelightexpress.com, and then it's also on my website. So it's all over the place, and your listeners know where to find that information. And you can email me too. Shoot me out a message if you want to talk to me, if you have questions, whatever. There's a whole bunch of us here, Avis, Peter. I'm available. It's all good. It's all good.
Well,
all right, I got to go. I got to pack. I got to get out of here.
I got to go too. I got people waiting to talk. So listen, hey, I'm glad you're well and travel safe, okay?
Thanks. Love you. Love everybody out there. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye now.
Bye, Sarah. That's Sarah Nash, the Cosmic Hooker. Today's show is Cosmic Hookers, Rad Chicks, and Bad Dogs. Bad Dog being John Trudell, and Rad Chick being our next guest all the way from Michigan. Turtle Island, here she is, Rad Chick.
Hey, Robert.
Hey, sorry for the bit of a wait and delay there, but welcome to the show. Really happy to have you today.
So it's good to be here, and I agree with the Cosmic Hooker. They are trying to kill us. We're just going to hit it from a different angle.
So let's get
about the radiation.
Yeah, let's get into it. She's up there in Washington State, right at the kind of the nape of the jet stream up there, getting lots of interesting particles, toxins, you name it, coming from the Far East. And you have been doing some stellar work on Fukushima. Where are we today as it relates to Fukushima and some of the fallout we've been experiencing for the past couple of years?
Well, the good news is there was an announcement today that they're going to shut down San Onofre.
I saw that.
Which is the reactor facility that's just outside of San Diego. And there's been, all kinds of activists that have been working very hard to get this plant shut down for a few months after they developed some really significant problems in their operations, which is kind of par for the course with all of these new plants because they're so old. So we have, that was the good news for today. The bad news is there's still 433 plants worldwide that need to be shut down. And if you want to know why, you just have to look at what happened at Fukushima and what's still going on there, which the news isn't reporting on. And, kind of interesting that this happens to be the weekend of the Bilderberg conference. And,
That's right.
9 out of the 10 top companies in the world are either oil, gas, or nuclear related.
Mm-hmm.
And most of those companies also own all the mainstream news outlets, which is why you don't hear about Fukushima, you don't hear about the health effects from radiation and fracking and, all the other things that are going on. And we're just trying to educate people and have them, pay attention to what's going on around them. And I, noticed both of you guys were talking about having some, serious health problems 2 years ago. That's
Yep.
when this accident first took place, was March of 2011.
Mm-hmm.
And it was absolutely horrendous what we were exposed to in those first few months after the accident. And
I'll never forget it. This was about a week after, and there was this ungodly hailstorm in Northern California that I'd never seen anything like it before, living all my years in Northern California. And that storm filled me with dread, absolute dread.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We've had people that have been monitoring the rad levels themselves, spending hundreds of dollars going out and buying Geiger counters because the EPA just shut down all the radiation monitors within a few weeks of the accident. And at the time we were seeing increases. I think, some of the highest were in Hawaii, Salt Lake City, Seattle, Portland, and Boulder, and LA. And, some of these were like 40% over what was considered like normal background, although, normal background now, after digging into this situation and realizing we've actually been getting nuked for decades, because of the atmospheric testing that was done, the 1,000+ nuclear detonations that we've done in the ocean and, on our own soil. And then, after we quit that program, we put in nuke plants everywhere, which are built to generate plutonium. That's what they do. The way they get the public to accept it is by saying, they generate electricity because they boil water and they make steam. But they actually also produce plutonium, which the government gets to keep to make bombs. So that's why we have nuke plants to begin with.
Yeah.
And most people aren't aware that every nuclear reactor generates 500 pounds of plutonium a year, and the government gets to collect that. That's part of their agreement for subsidizing the plants, and then, all these company operators have close ties to all the politicians who have passed laws in turn to protect these plants, so when something does go wrong, the taxpayers pay for the cleanup.
Mm-hmm.
It's just complete insanity.
So what we have here is we have a facility that produces power, but is also a munitions plant at the same time.
Right, they're bomb-making plants is what they are.
Amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So what's going on with some of the levels, some of the rad levels now in the Pacific Northwest? I just reading the other day where they're catching bluefin tuna off the coast of California that are loaded with radioactivity and all kinds of other interesting substances from Fukushima. So what's the latest stats we're seeing?
It's funny because a lot of those stories are just being reported on now. Those tuna were actually collected in August of 2011. Mm-hmm. And I think the first university to put out a report on this was Stanford in maybe May of 2012. But these were on fish that were collected 7 months previously. They actually detected radiation from Fukushima at extremely high levels off the Pacific coast of North America 2 weeks after the accident. Yep. Stuff moves really fast.
Yep.
And what happens once it gets into the food chain is something called bioaccumulation and biomagnification, where a smaller organism will absorb particles, then something will come along and eat that, and so it'll have more of it inside of it, and it works its way up the food chain, and we're at the top of the food chain. And we know how this works. because our government has studied it for decades. We know that radiation, even very, very low levels of radiation, causes extreme damage to DNA. We've known that since 1920, when Dr. Mueller did his Drosophila fruit fly experiments, exposing them to chest X-ray radiation, and then monitoring the offspring because they breed so rapidly. It's easy to see, several generations in a short period of time. He actually won the Nobel Prize for that research, and it's completely ignored. Doctors aren't even taught in medical school the effects of radiation unless they go into oncology, and then, of course, it's because they're using it to treat cancer. And if you look at the cancer rates in the United States alone, just over the last 50 or 60 years since we've done all these atmospheric tests and since we put in, 100-plus nuke plants across America, the rates are just exponential. Mm-hmm. And this is a huge income generator now, is the healthcare industry.
Yeah. So you're talking about the cancer industry, and probably no coincidence that the rate of cancer worldwide has exploded in relation to the amount of testing and the proliferation of nuclear power plants and radioactive techniques in terms of charting, discovering cancer, i.e. the X-ray. I don't think you can separate the two in terms of what we're dealing with cancer.
Right, and even like in states where I live in Michigan, we have, nuke plants sitting all over Michigan, which is surrounded by the largest freshwater supply in the world, which is a bad idea to begin with.
Right.
But the governor of Michigan received all of his funding for his last campaign from the nuke industry, the chemical industry, and from the healthcare industry, because we used to be, the auto industry was a big moneymaker here, but of course now that's been outsourced, so it's not anymore. The healthcare industry is now the number one contributor to the state. So, they don't have an interest in keeping people healthy.
No.
And they don't want people to know how dangerous nuke plants are, because if people really knew the truth, they would want all of these plants shut down. And you can look back at rainfall maps around nuke plants, and they overlay with breast cancer and autism. And, everybody thinks, cancer from radiation, they're worried about that, but there are so many things that come before that in terms of health. And, the biggest problem is, like, how it affects your immune system because of all this, what we've been exposed to through, even the depleted uranium that we've spread all over, Iraq and Afghanistan, and now they have horrendous, burst effects that are occurring because of that. That eventually gets put up into the atmosphere, and it rains out over here, too, especially along the Gulf Coast states.
Right, absolutely.
So, we have all these fans that get blown around from uranium mining in Africa and in Canada, and that all goes up into the jet stream as well. And we have 85% of the fallout from nuclear tests that are still in the upper atmosphere. So people get exposed to that, plus Fukushima now. And, how many people do you know right now that have cancer? I have several friends that are, middle-aged that are having all kinds of strange symptoms. Their doctors don't know what's wrong with them. Of course, when they go to the doctor, they get put on medication. Then they need to come back to have levels checked for the medication. Then because they're taking meds, they have stomach problems. They can't eat. Now they're depressed, so they need to go on antidepressants. You get into this, vicious cycle. And a lot of this starts with what we're exposed to in our environment. Yep. And the same things that you do to, eliminate exposure to, chemtrails and other toxins in your food supply and water supply, those all help with mitigating for radiation as well. and it's really easy stuff that you can do to avoid it.
I have a question for you.
Basically just being healthier.
Yeah, I have a question for you. It didn't take them very long to turn Chernobyl into a cement tomb. Why haven't they done that with Fukushima?
I guess either they don't care, or it's so bad that they don't feel that they can mitigate it. I know it'd be really, really expensive, and they consider doing some pretty drastic things at the beginning. The U.S. military, Arnie Gunderson had reported that the U.S. military considered nuking the site and blowing the whole thing into the ocean. So at least all the radioactive fuel would be underwater, and the Pacific Ocean would be toast after that, but it kind of already is, because we're still pouring, 9 tons of water per reactor per day on all of these melted fuel blobs, and there's 3 of them just at that one plant.
Yeah.
There's 3,000 to 5,000 degrees. They have to be constantly cooled so they don't get into a chain reaction scenario where they set everything else off at the site. And this is going to be, endless. In Chernobyl, they hit it hardcore. Right at the beginning, they dumped lead and sand on the reactor.
That's
so they
right.
put the fire out within 2 weeks. Then they actually sent a train to a town and had 300,000 miners come to the site, and they took turns because of their exposure levels. They could only be working for a certain period of time before their exposure was too great. They dug a huge tunnel underneath the plant and backfilled it with boron, which negates the nuclear reaction in concrete, to keep it from getting into the groundwater supply. They haven't done any of that here at Fukushima because they've been arguing about who's going to pay for it, how much it's going to cost, how they're going to find people to do it. They're having a hard enough time just keeping employees because of their exposure levels. They can only work for so long before they've had, their lifetime dose of exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these people, because they need to work so bad, they don't even use their dosimeters. They leave them in their lockers. They want to keep working. And, we're looking at, possibly centuries before this situation is containable.
Mm-hmm.
The fuel's so hot, no one can get near it. Robots can't get near it. They send cameras down, cameras break. They send robots in, the robots fry.
Isn't it amazing? Even robots can get in there and do the work.
Yeah, it fries the circuitry.
Yeah.
So, they just have this endless water pouring that they're going to do, and what happens is the water either pours into the ocean because the ground's been so compromised there from all the cracks from the earthquakes and from the explosions in the reactor buildings, or they capture some of the water and they put it in tanks. And now a lot of those tanks are leaking because the radiation just weakens the metal.
Right.
And that's why nuclear reactors have to be replaced every few years too, because it weakens the steel. So we have this technology that we can't fix when something goes wrong. And, we've seen this all before at Chernobyl. We didn't learn the lesson there. We saw it happen at 3 Mile Island, and which is still, the health effects from that are ongoing. And now, we have more contamination on our west coast of the United States than they have on the west coast of Japan, because everything that comes out of those reactors either goes into the ocean or up into the air, and then it rains out over here. And the people in the Pacific Northwest are getting hit really hard with it.
Yeah.
If there's any remediation that needs to be done, it needs to start there first. But, I'm considerably downwind from that in Michigan, and we've seen evidence of it here in thyroid problems. A few physicians that I've talked to recently said they have had a huge increase in the number of thyroid cases. They've had a huge increase in the number of strange tumors, not metastatic tumors, but tumors that are benign but are just growing in weird places.
Yep.
And, there's strontium that goes right to the bone. Cesium goes right to the heart. We've had a number of young kids who are runners and swimmers on the West Coast that have dropped dead from heart attacks with no explanation. And according to the CDC's own data, we had 23,000 people that died in the first 14 weeks after Fukushima happened that were in excess of what the mortality tables expected as normal. You know, they track disease and death on a weekly basis. Actually, the numbers are presented to the CDC, and if you look at all the charts for those going back years and years, you can see there's a steady decline in some of those numbers. And after March 11th, they really shot up, and they've stayed up. And Loren Murray, who's a whistleblower who used to work at Lawrence Livermore Lab, and is now she's actually best known for being a DU expert, and she's done a lot of interviews about Fukushima. You know, she said the numbers that the CDC gets, you have to crunch them, to crunch this data and put it into tables so you can really decipher what's going on. And if you go back and you look at just 2011, we had 100,000 excess deaths in North America, or in the United States, just from March 11th of 2011 to December 31st of 2011. There's never been any explanation from the CDC or the National Institutes of Health or public health departments about this. They're just not talking about this because that's probably what they've been instructed to do.
Right. Yeah, they don't want to talk about it. They want to keep it on the down low. One of the things that you and I had talked about before we got on the air today was what can people do about this? How can they, deal with some of these really radical factors in our environment? And we were going to get into a little bit of bioremediation and trying to stay healthy. So let's get into that for a little bit here. What's in your toolkit? What can you share with people that they can use in their lives?
Well, the two ways that radiation gets into the body the easiest is through drinking water and through milk.
Mm.
And the higher fat content in the milk, the lower the radiation will be. But you have to kind of picture what's been happening here for the last 2 years is we've had significant rainout of fallout from Japan that's landed, on the West Coast, on the ground. The grass is growing. The cows eat that grass. Hawaii has actually been feeding boron to its cows since, I think, April of 2011, but they're not doing that here. There's radiation in the milk supply. It's been measured. Even the EPA has reported on that. But, their story is always, it's at such low levels, it's not detrimental to health, but those levels are in reference to someone who's like a soldier in the military, a 25-year-old male.
Right.
They're not taking into consideration that kids are drinking this milk and that children whose cells are dividing are going to be the most affected. So the biggest change that you can make is to filter your water, which hopefully most people are doing already, considering what's been found in our water supply. There's been uranium in the LA water supply for like 20 years because of meltdowns that they had at the Rocketdyne plant.
Right.
So depending on where you live, how close you live to either, a munition processing facility, and we have, multiple ones across the United States, how close you live to a nuke plant, how close you live to a uranium mining facility. We have a lot of those in the Southwest. You're going to want to be much more aggressive with your mitigation, and that means, filtering water is a big one. Cutting way back on the amount of milk that you drink and drinking one with a higher fat content if you do, because there's less radiation in it. And understanding the process of biomagnification, bioaccumulation. The radiation is going to be higher in meat sources. So it's a really good time to consider being more of a vegetarian, maybe not a full-blown vegetarian, but eating more plants and trying to find produce that's grown in South America, opposed to North America, or grown indoors. And there's some aquaponics companies that have been started in the Pacific Northwest because of Fukushima. And I mean, that I think is really where this is going, that, you know, all food needs to be grown indoors where you control the soil, the water, and the air.
Wow.
And not just because of radiation, but because of all the other pesticides and, you know, the chemtrails and everything else that we're exposed to.
It's true.
Food has become almost like poison to us. And then, you know, you get into the whole GMO thing. And, you know, my gosh, the reason, you know, they're not doing anything about this, they don't care. If you're sick, being sick just makes you more controllable. You know,
and it gives you a longer shelf life. Yeah, it gives you a shorter shelf life too. I mean, you know, if the agenda is to cull people, then, you know, let's just load up the food with as many toxic agents as possible, make some money off them while they're sick, and then usher them out of here faster and at greater numbers than ever before. So yeah, I think it's tragic that this is happening, and that we actually have to, you know, grow our food indoors. It reminds me of that movie Silent Running with Bruce Dern, and how all of Earth has been deforested, and there's a ship in space with about 3 or 4 biodomes that have all the last forests on Earth, and it kind of feels like we're headed in that direction, which is kind of crazy. We're going to have John Trudell on in a few minutes, and we're going to talk about hemp and cannabis as it relates to what you're doing in your work. But you also said to me that you were interested in maybe taking a phone call or two. Do you want to do that?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, so I'm going to open up the phone lines here, 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. If you have any questions for Radchick concerning anything that's going on with the state of the world with radiation or cesium or strontium poisoning, you know, or anything environmental that you want to know about or have a burning question, you can call in now. If you have a question about more tips around staying healthy and what you can do, you can also call in now and ask a question as well, 347-308-8995. Now, you have a website, and it is fukushimafacts.com, and you also have a pretty robust YouTube channel as well where people can get updates on a lot of this information. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I have a radio show called Nuked Radio that airs Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we talk about Fukushima and all the other nuke stuff. I'm taking a break from that for a couple of weeks, though, because I've got a couple of different projects going on, and I need to manage my time a little better. One of the things is I started a mutation project about 1.5 years ago, because I started noticing mutations in the plants in my area of the country, and I was posting pictures about it, and people were saying, you know what, I'm a gardener, and this is happening in my garden, and this isn't normal. And so I put out a call for images, and I've had just hundreds of images that have been sent to me, and I have researchers that are interested in those images now. In fact, Arnie Gunderson and I spoke about 2 weeks ago for over an hour about just the mutation images that I've been collecting, and I'm organizing all those by state and burning them to CDs to send them to researchers. I've had a couple grad students that I've been helping give them information to write their final projects. And I need to really get this organized, because now that we're in the second growing season with all of this radiation exposure, I mean, I've been just inundated with pictures already. And, you know, it's only been going on for 2 months. Most of the stuff that I'm getting is coming from the West Coast so far, but I've had submissions too from Illinois, from the Chicago area, from New York State, from Michigan. I've seen them here as well. So it's almost a full-time job, and I'm trying to recruit people to help me with it, because this is really the only physical evidence that we have, and it gets people's attention too. You know, they might not want to hear about the nuclear stuff, but when they see mutated plants, sometimes that's more interesting to them. And so it's kind of a way to get people, you know, more interested in the problem. I mean, there's definitely an environmental factor of why this is happening, and we need people who have really good access to very expensive equipment to test some of these plants for us and to find out why they're occurring. But I have a friend who did this after the 3 Mile Island accident in Pennsylvania. Her name's Mary Osborne. She has a website where she has all kinds of mutation images posted, and they did this in Chernobyl too. You can find pictures of mutations in pine trees and other things right on the EPA's website, and you put those images next to the ones I'm getting and the ones that Mary took, and they all look the same. They find mutated plants around nuke plants all the time. And, if it's happening in the plants, it's happening in the people.
That's right.
And, just we don't know how bad it's going to be because there's been so much information about this accident that's been kept from us. But when all you need to do is really just be a healthier person and be aware, I think it's a pretty, small investment to make, considering what the possible outcome could be.
What are some of the mutations you're noticing?
Well, things that grow really fast, like dandelions, produce, there's different kinds of mutations from radiation. One is called twinning, where something that will usually grow one flower or one fruit will split into two, like a conjoined twin.
Mm-hmm.
There's something called witch's broom, where typically a plant that will grow into one axial branch will spread out like a broom and grow like 5 or 8 or 10 branches. And there's, I did a whole interview with Loren Murray about this that I can send you a link to, with a lot of the images that we've collected from people. And then there's something called gigantism, where part of a plant, not the entire plant, but part of it will grow much larger than the rest of the plant. And we see that a lot in maple trees and in oak trees, where some of the leaves are just huge. They're way outside what you would consider normal for the tree. And that can be an effect from radiation, too.
Wow, that's kind of scary. If people want to contribute to your project or help you out, how would they go about doing that?
Send me pictures. I have a page on Facebook called Mutation Watch, and anyone who finds anything weird in their garden, or strange out in nature, if you can take a high-resolution photograph with it and upload it, that's very helpful. And just really spreading this information around. I don't accept any money for doing this. I never have, although at some point I'm probably going to have to, because my costs are getting kind of outrageous with some of the equipment that I need for the radio show and things like that. But, I've never accepted a dime for doing this because I felt that the value of the information was too important. And I knew that, people who were shills and so forth would say, oh, she's trying to scare people to make money and, push water filters or this and that. We don't have any ads on the radio station that I broadcast from or on any of my websites. We put a link up there for T-shirts because people wanted them. And if we ever get enough money from that, we'll buy a Geiger counter to give it away on the radio show. But that's it for now. Just sharing the information is great.
Yeah. Have you ever ran across Woody Harrelson? Has he ever stepped into your world and helped you out a little bit?
No, but I saw his Ethos documentary recently, and he's one of the people on my list to send to. I've been hounding Joe Rogan forever because he talks about the nuke stuff. I think he even visited Fukushima. Like, he gets it, He understands, how dangerous these plants are. And, I've had, so I have sent him a bunch of emails, but I've never heard back from him. Woody Harrelson would be a good one, though, to try, too. And I guess Martin Sheen, he's been a huge DU supporter and was very active in trying to get legislation passed in California to not use it on, the military bases there. So that's another person that's been suggested to me to try to make contact with.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we call up John Trudell? And John, I don't know what kind of access John has to Hollywood at any point in time right now, but Let's bring him on, because John is definitely somebody who has a high profile, number one, but number two has also been involved in activism, and right now is really focusing on hemp and cannabis, and I've been kind of saving this part of our talk so that we can bring John into the mix and we can talk about that together. So let me fire up the phone line here, which is not always the easiest thing to do. Okay, so hold on a second. Let's see. Let's do this. Here we go.
There's a couple of really good studies for your listeners to look up if they want information on using cannabis to mitigate for radiation. And I always say, to people, regardless of what your feelings are about cannabis, the radiation threat that we have had from Fukushima, which is, ongoing and will be for the rest of our lives and our children's lives, really, necessitate giving it another look. Mm-hmm. And we have 20,000 studies from Europe that show that cannabis can help alleviate, I think it's 126 conditions. But even in the U.S., a Harvard medical study from 2007 showed that the active ingredient in marijuana cut tumor growth in half. And the U.S. government actually funded that study, hoping to show how dangerous cannabis was, and it showed, the complete opposite. I believe it was Dr. Tasher that did that study, who's very well-respected. And another study that's really important is called Prenatal Marijuana Exposure and Neonatal Outcomes in Jamaica. And it's where they studied women who used cannabis as part of their, religion in Jamaica or their culture while they were pregnant, and half of the group used it, half of it didn't. The babies that were born to the mothers that used cannabis throughout their pregnancy actually outscored all of the babies of the mothers who didn't.
And not only that, but they knew all of Bob Marley's lyrics by heart, too, at the same time. Let's bring John on, and let's get into this cannabis hemp interzone when it comes to bioremediation and also just staying healthy in general. So let's hit the phone here, see if we can bring John on.
Hello?
John Trudell?
Yeah.
Hey, it's Robert Phoenix. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, man. Welcome to the show. I've got Rad Chick from Michigan live with us, and we're just getting ready to talk about hemp and cannabis as a source of bioremediation. And she just shared a case study with us, John, about a group of women living in Jamaica who were smoking cannabis while they were pregnant with their children. It was a control test. Half the group smoked, half the group didn't, and the group that did smoke, their kids, when they reached a certain age, had really extremely high test scores. So that's kind of where we are in the conversation. So I want to introduce you to Ratchick, who's on the air with us right now. Ratchick, this is Bad Dog himself, John Trudell.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, well, it's good to be met. So anyway, let's continue on with this.
So, John, what I wanted to kind of, sort of jam here for about 15 minutes is to try to find a place where, we can tap into both of your mind shares about hemp, number one, and cannabis, number two, as it relates to the environmental crisis, particularly the fallout from Fukushima, DU, and some of the other stuff that we're experiencing on a planetary level. In terms of your work, John, what have you seen and encountered when it comes to hemp and dealing with this incredibly toxic and nasty sort of death spiral the planet's in right now due to this stuff?
Well, I mean, what I see, mainly to me is I think that the environmentalists, I don't know how this answers your question, but I think that the environmentalist movement and consciousness, I really think that they should be paying more attention to hemp as a solution or a partial solution to the environmental and economic crisis that we're faced with. Because I think that hemp, because to me a part of the biggest obstacle is that, number one, the general public just really has no real awareness of the practicalities of hemp. I mean, just generally speaking, the mass public really doesn't have that information. And as environmentalists, I think that we should really put a focus on what is called industrial hemp, because it would help us to deal with global warming. You know, it would help us to deal with reducing the amount of toxins and pesticides and chemical attacks that go on against the land and the water through industry and stuff. So I think that, so I look at the petrochemical society, obviously industry is being a major obstacle and problem because they don't want this to happen. But at the same time, I look at the environmental movement, and I think that we have to try and change our tactics and think in terms of doing something differently than we've been doing, because we're not, we're losing ground. Anyway, I don't know how that answers your question, but I think that's based on him.
Yeah, I think it opens up an interesting space. And Ratchet, how are you experiencing in your work when you're dealing with trying to enlighten people about what's going on with Fukushima and the fallout? How are you experiencing people and their receptivity to working with hemp? And what are some of the examples that you found with hemp, with bioremediation, and how it might actually help us right here, right now, dealing with the fallout from Fukushima?
Well, I've been a long-time cannabis supporter, and I do want to mention that I worked in clinical research, and I actually worked for the National Institutes of Health doing studies on kids that had brain cancer, and it's long been downtrodden as what a valuable medicine cannabis itself was. I really was unaware of how effective hemp is in decontaminating soil. That was one of the first things I started looking into when I was trying to figure out at the beginning of this Fukushima accident, what are we going to do to clean this up? Like, what are some of our options? And sunflowers are also very effective at removing cesium from soil, but I mean, hemp, like John said, it can be used to clean up metals, pesticides, solvents, explosives. It can remove radioactive elements from, like, even former weapons-producing facilities. They have extreme contamination, like some of the places we were talking about. It removes hydrocarbons and all kinds of toxins that are leaching out of landfills. And the fact that, it's illegal, and there's so much confusion between hemp and then cannabis as a medicine, the United States government actually convinced Japan, as part of their Cannabis Act, in right after World War II, when they were occupied, to sign this act, so that they had to go through extreme permits to allow them to grow hemp in any prefectures in Japan. And right now there's only 120 hemp farmers in Japan. They need to be growing this stuff all over. Their contamination problems are extremely severe, and it's an ongoing thing. And the sooner we get started on it, the better it will be for the health of our children and our whole planet. And we just have enormous problems from not only the radioactive contamination, but all of these other things. And there's a synergy between these chemicals and radiation. So if you get hit with one or the other, like, for instance, people who live around the Gulf of Mexico and have been exposed to crude oil from the BP accident, which in turn has rained out over those states, and then there's the core exit, and that's rained out over those states. When this stuff mixes with radiation, the effect of both of those things together can be 10, 20, 100, 1,000 times higher than what it would be just if you were exposed to core exit alone or radiation alone. And people need to understand those synergistic values, or a multiplier effect, and how detrimental this stuff is to your health. So, hemp is very, very useful. One of the best things that we have in our arsenal right now to help combat these extreme contamination issues that we face, in my opinion.
Hey, John, this is National Hemp Week, and I wanted to get a sense from you from the last time we talked, which was, I think, maybe about 2 months ago, but it's National Hemp Week. And I wanted to get a sense from you as to kind of, where we are right now with, getting some of these measures, like in places like Kentucky and some of the other states, the tobacco growing states. How closer are we than we were 2 months ago from getting some real traction in terms of getting hemp taken seriously in terms of a crop here that can really help?
Well, I mean, obviously, in a couple of months time having passed, I don't think we've moved a lot. But I think there is movement. I think we are headed in a direction of where hemp will be brought back into the reality of American life. I think that's attainable. I think that we can get there. But how quickly it's going to happen and how effectively, I'm not sure. Because I think a part of that's the decision that we make, the people that are for hemp. I think we have a tremendous amount of influence in how quickly this can't happen. But that influence has to do with how realistically we perceive what we're dealing with. And I know there's more awareness about hemp. I know that there have been, maybe half or maybe close to a dozen. I don't have a specific number in front of me, but there's more than a dozen states that have legalized hemp within their own state in varying degrees. Now, they can't operate on that because it's against federal law, so farmers can't really pick it up and take it. But the reality is different states are passing it. And the other thing that's interesting about it is of the people that are supporting hemp, it takes, I've noticed that you've got what would be identified as Republican right people endorsing this, as well as what would be defined as Democratic liberal people.
Right.
So I find that interesting, that the polarization isn't there like it is on most other issues. So I look at that as a positive. And the other thing that I find interesting, I've noticed more and more, I'm noticing some of the biggest opponents of legalizing hemp are law enforcement agencies. Now,
well, that makes a lot of sense, because that would take away, one of their cash crops, which would be, major swaths of enforcement on many different levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and when you think about it, it seems like law enforcement should be advocating the growth of hemp, because marijuana pot growers aren't going to plant the pot where there's hemp growing. It's not going to happen.
That's right.
Release the pot. Right? So anyway, I think as I look around here, and I'm in California, and I'm working with the California State Granges actually about educating and raising awareness around industrial hemp. So when I look around, I see there are what I call hemp people. There are a lot of hemp people. There's a lot of hemp energy floating around this country. All right, but it's kind of separated from it. It's separated from itself. They're kind of isolated from each other. So the hemp energy, hemp movement, hemp people, hemp energy doesn't recognize just how large it is. And I think if we can find a way to get that recognition of just how many of us there are out here, then I think we can expedite what we're up to.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have the two of you on the show today, because one of the things that, obviously we have in our arsenal is the ability to network and to be socially connected in really interesting ways that we've never had before, mostly in real time. So, I was hoping that the two of you could experience some kind of cross-pollination, if not now, somewhere down the road, where you can join your efforts, or at least have a dialogue where Radchik is coming from her part of the world, which is about, bringing a greater amount of awareness to people's lives about the dangers and the toxicity of radiation and cesium and strontium and all this other stuff, and you're out there, John, pounding the pavement to, get this happening and make this a viable crop across the United States on an industrial level. So I think what you're talking about is more networking and actually expanding this umbrella of various groups and people so that ultimately we're all just in this together. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. The chemtrail people and the Monsanto people and, the weather watchers and the oath keepers, and I mean, all of us need to work together because we're all fighting the same people that are responsible for everything.
And I kind of think, but I'm looking at putting an emphasis on what is identified as the environmental movement. And if we can get what I'm going to call the general environmental movement to understand what we have in common here with the hemp plant. See, this is something that no matter what aspect of the environmental movement we're connected to, with the hemp plant we have that in common, because the hemp plant is definitely earth medicine. It's so directly related. So hemp, and what makes us, part of what helps us to have it in common is because every environmental issue that we're confronted with, hemp would help us to solve that problem. See that, and that's what makes it in a way different from all the other issues we're dealing with. Because hemp will affect the air quality. It will affect the water quality. It will protect the land. Erosion from the toxicity that's being put into the land, all right, to things like erosion of the land. Mm-hmm. So so hemp. So I'm kind of looking at how do we get the environmental movement to understand this, because one of the problems with the movements in the past is we become compartmentalized in what our specialty is.
Right.
So if I'm for solar energy or if I'm for wind energy, whatever it is, see, so we don't consider anything outside of those. But so what I'm trying to see is, well, is there a way if we can get the environmental people, environmentalists, to consider hemp, not changing anything they're doing other than to include hemp? I mean, because like we look at what's going on with the fracking. There's all this resistance and opposition to fracking, but nobody's coming up with what to replace it with.
Right.
And in some of these areas, especially where there's fracking lines or where this stuff is really happening, hemp would grow in that whole territory. That whole territory that they want to lay them pipelines through, well, the majority of it, hemp would grow. And it would generate more of an economy than laying a pipeline would.
Right.
And I think if as environmentalists, if we could have some discussion about this, so we could go into communities and explain, do we have something to replace it with? Because a lot of people that are going to accept the pipeline stuff is because they need the jobs.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. In terms, John, in terms of, and Ratchik, in terms of getting the message out there from, disparate sources, what are some of the tools, or what are some of the platforms you guys have discovered in order to reach out and enlighten, educate, and bring more people in through the various portals of your work?
Well, obviously, one-on-one, individual conversations, group conversations, group meetings, seeking things, social media, events, trying to organize, different events, concerts, benefits, or et cetera, whatever, right? I think working with, and what we're doing, we're placing a heavy emphasis, or an emphasis on working with the farmers. Mm-hmm. We're working through the California State Range, but working with the farmers, because they have the most direct relationship with the land. Mm-hmm. So in a way, it's like, all of the movements that went on in the past, the 60s, everybody, the romanticism of the 60s and all this and that. But, in none of our stuff was there ever any land-based people as a part of the movement that took place. These were all urban, or rural, maybe rural, but not farmer-based. Mm-hmm. We didn't have that. But see, with hemp, working with hemp, we have an opportunity to be inclusive. with the land-based people because they're so directly, the farms are so directly affected by this.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's not an easy question to answer about how to go about this, because I trust and expect that we would use our own sense of individual responsibility to how we deal with things, to take and use our own sense of individual responsibility to learn as much of the factual information about hemp as we can, and to take what makes sense of that to go out and make sense to other people with it.
Right.
But in a way, it starts with, it's like the best way to head into it to me is, well, for us, number one, to not make any emotional decisions around this. For us to learn the facts, understand the facts, the truth, and the reality about what we're dealing with. Take the time to understand it.
Yeah.
And then go out and communicate that understanding. Because that's basically what it breaks down to.
Hey, Radchik, do you have a good hemp bioremediation factoid or story you want to share with John before we say goodbye to you?
Well, we have information from what's called the Consolidated Growers and Processors Phytotech from the Ukraine. They did a study since 1998 on using hemp to decontaminate the lands around Chernobyl. Mm-hmm. And what I thought was so fascinating, because I've always wondered, after you use the hemp to decontaminate soil, like, what do you do with the plant? Like, you can't burn it because you're just putting the stuff back up into the air. But what they did with the hemp that they've been using around Chernobyl is they've turned it into biofuel, and they've created thousands of jobs for people, a whole new industry. And I mean, it's difficult to visualize that happening in the States, knowing the oil and the gas companies kind of run everything. But, anything that can help create jobs or get people interested in that industry, I think is really remarkable that they can do that with something they're using to clean up. And I don't know anything really about that process. Maybe John knows a little bit more about it than me, but I would like to link to your site on my website, if that's all right with you, John.
Oh, yeah.
My website's Fukushima Facts, and we have a whole page on, like, mitigation for RADs about, food and avoiding rain and precipitation and things like that. And I'd like to maybe put a link to your websites up there as well. Because really the key is education for everyone.
Yeah, feel free to make the linkage. Sounds good to me. And it is. It's, to me, getting people to recognize hemp, the identity of hemp on its own. I mean, we have the confusion terms and stuff, but so I'm going for terminology, I'm using industrial hemp. You get people to understand and recognize the true value and reality of industrial hemp. I call it raising awareness, education, but to get this information out, and I think that's key to get factual information out, and don't allow the opposition to bog you down into a demonization, quarreling, and name calling. Go for the, find the facts and stay with the facts, and don't let the bad guys distract us.
So, Radchik, you can find John on Facebook. He's got a page there. He also has his Hempstead project page there on Facebook as well. So you guys should definitely link up. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you both on the show at the same time, do cross-pollinating, and hopefully continue to work and grow towards a much more sustainable future together. Radchik, thank you for coming on the show, and I want to have you back on again someday, okay?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, have a great day. Take care now.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care. Yeah, bye-bye.
John, it's you and I now, just me and you. And again, I want to thank you for coming on the show. And obviously, we're going to continue to talk about hemp. But I also wanted to tap you a little bit here because of your background and the work that you've done and the people that you've run into over time. It's come to the light of day now that the NSA is basically listening to everybody, whether it's Verizon or whether it's Skype or maybe this radio show or wherever. But we are now deeply in the pocket of the surveillance state. and I know that you've been dealing with this for most of your life. So I just wanted to get some insight from you around it from your own personal perspective, and also, what you think is really going on here.
Well, yeah, this fine thing. Well, my first thought about it really was I was surprised that people are surprised.
Yes.
Why do you not, why do you, not you personally, but you generally speaking, right? We, right? Why do we think they gave us this stuff in the first place?
Uh-huh.
This electronic technology that they've handed over to us, that was always the intent. Two intents: to control us through consumerism and to monitor, but this time to monitor, track, and control us through consumerism. Through the consumerism of the individualized, personalized electronics. See, so they came up with the technology as to use it as a control mechanism over us, right, and get us to willingly consume it. So, that's what it's all about. And for me personally, back during, the 70s, I got something like 17,000 pages I accumulated with whoever they are, the FBI, the Nash, whoever they are. Anyway, I had this big old thing, and so since that time, and at that time when I found out that happened, because I thought, I'm me, I know what I'm up to. I'm not a military threat, and I'm not an economic threat. I'm no threat to these people. So why all the pages? What's that all about? All right. But anyway, once I realized that this is happening, had gone on, so I'm not surprised. The thing that I'm not surprised that they're doing it. I'm surprised that people are surprised by it.
Now, look, this happened in your life, 17,000 pages, which is a tremendous amount of content for one guy, right? I mean, think about that. That's a huge amount of content for you. And then you multiply that by the people that, you were with during that time and period. You've got a whole industry, really, that's surrounding surveillance.
Yeah.
And that's another topic altogether. But I guess my feeling here is that, or what I want to explore here with you is that you guys knew that this was going on. How did it change your culture, and did it change it at all? And how do you think people are going to respond to this now? Or is there going to be more outrage, less outrage? What's your prognostication around this?
On this one, there's going to be polarization. There's going to be outrage and polarization. All right, the people, the citizens that are outraged about privacy and this and that, all right, they're going to be outraged by it. All right, but the people that want the state to have the authority it has, so they're going to have a strong voice in supporting it. And then they're going to go through the political motions. Congress is going to blah, 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 and they're going to go through all the political motions and this and that, and people will go have their emotional reactions to all this and that, but yet the reality is the policy is set in place and the program will go on. And they're refining it. They're refining the program for basically for control. And they're more and more sure of themselves, all right, and in the control that they have over the citizenry, because they're making more and more obvious to the citizenry now. And the citizenry, in the end, they're going to do what they've been doing this whole time. Complain about it, but not really. They're going to complain and emotionally react to the situation, all right. But I don't think they're going to slow down and put time into thinking up some kind of a way to deal with this that's different than what we've been doing.
Right. I mean, I think that we might be able to look at more privatized networks. I know that one of the things that Yahoo is about to announce is that in order for you to continue to use Yahoo Mail, you're going to have to agree to allow Yahoo to scan every single email inside of your email box, and whether it's trash or ingoing or outgoing, they're gonna grab all this information now, and people are gonna need to make some choices about where they're doing business and who they're doing business with, at least at a fundamental level. Do you think that could actually make a difference at all, John?
Well, I think that, number one, I think they do it anyway.
Yeah.
Whatever you just said that they're going to make mandatory, they do it anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So to me, whether they're making me do it or they're doing it without me knowing it, it's being done. All right?
Right.
So I don't get lost in that part. All right?
Yeah.
And just because I know it is what it is like that. But the irony one of the ironies to this, and I can't quite sort it out, but it's got something to do with, I guess, our own personal ethics and keeping our own balance and stuff. But one of the ironies to this is that we're all tribal descendants. We all started out from tribes, and so we started out from little villages, and, social groups. So when we go back to the history of our evolution, through the great majority of the history of our evolution, we didn't have any privacy anyway. If you think about it, we lived in these small communities. Very small communities. Everybody knew what everybody was doing.
Right.
So so when you lived in that kind of an environment, then everybody had to have ethics, so to speak.
Yep.
The irony to me is, anyway, so here's all this thing coming around, this whole big thing coming around back to what it was in a way before. I mean, that privacy issue. Now, what has changed from the way it was before, what's coming around with this thing, all right, what has changed from before, the thing that's coming around now is very predatory, and it eats off of our human energy.
Right.
That's what's different. And did I just lose yourself? I lose you there? I think I lost myself.
No, you didn't lose me. I'm right with you. In fact, where I'm going with it, John, is I'm thinking also that we can't, that the metaphor is great. Like in a tribal culture, everybody knows what everybody else is doing, so there is a level of ethics. You can't really hide anything. I totally get that. The irony I think you're talking about is that's there, but we don't know what they're doing, right? We can't watch the watchers, and I think that's the ironic part. That we can't watch the watchers, but in a way we can watch ourselves, right?
So we can watch what the watchers are watching, and deal with it,
Right.
But anyway, but a part of what I'm getting at is our approach to all of this. Because, it's like, well, they're invading our privacy and it's violating our freedoms, because a whole lot of our mindset is based around how the state is violating our freedoms, and this is the latest incident of it, so to speak. The pipeline stuff that they're going to do, that's another example of violating our freedoms. And the whole, well, anyway, we're all aware of what all is going on. And
right.
And I think, which is frustrating, it's frustrating us, and so generally speaking, we have these emotional reactions where we protest, we do whatever, but we have these emotional reactions out of frustration, but we're not really coming up with any effective solution to deal with our emotional frustrations.
That's right.
Going on.
Yeah,
right?
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So we seem to be perpetuating that circle. So what I think is, amongst us, within ourselves individually, collectively, but amongst ourselves, amongst us, I think we really need to think in terms of responsibility. And we need to examine this mantra of freedom that we keep chasing. This self-hypnotizing chant that puts us into this unrealistic, unnatural fantasy state. And freedom, and that, so we need to really start thinking about this concept of freedom. All right? and compare it to the concept of responsibility. Responsibility. See, because freedom, let's be realistic here. In the land of freedom, all right, you have to pay money to be born.
Yeah.
Somebody has to pay money for you to die.
Yep.
And you got to have money the whole time in between. So
That's
where's
right.
the free? At the most basic level, where is the free? And if you're a human being in this land of the free, but inside your individual mind, your perception of yourself is one based upon these things, like these esteem, these low self-esteem, these negative self-images, these fears, these doubts, these insecurities. So where's the free? So obviously what's going on is we're being snowed with this terminology of freedom, a sound. We're being snowed with a sound, all right, but we're not seeing the reality.
Yep.
And so the reality is, to me, a part of the reality is we need to individually, within ourselves, examine the concept and think about the concept and idea of responsibility.
Right. Responsibility brings it all home, doesn't it?
Responsibility and our relationship to it.
Yep.
All right, because our relationship to it, because see, we get frustrated at what the bad guys are doing, and out of our frustration, we react and we do whatever we do to try to prevent what the bad guys are doing. But when we do that, when we do that out of emotional extremism, the chaos of emotional reaction, then we're not using our energy, the energy of our intelligence. We're not generating our energy responsibly. All right? And I think there's the key to what's going on is there, how we generate our energy. The energy we put into a thing. If we have a problem, well, the energy we carry into to creating a solution to that problem is going to be the energy that's in that solution. All right? And so if we have a problem, let's say fracking. So the energy we carry into that is of our emotionalism. We carry the energy of our emotionalism basically all based around fear and frustration and anger at the injustice of all of that, but all this energy. So if that's the energy we carry in to creating a solution, that's the energy that's going to be in the solution, and therefore there's not going to really be any solution.
Yeah, I agree.
Redressing the thing.
Yeah.
Right,
that's an extremely lucid breakdown of that process.
So the energy that we carry into creating a solution to anything, whether it's personal, collectively, whatever, the energy we carry in, we individually need to start considering the energy that we carry in. Yeah. The energy I'm talking about is the energy and the power of our creative mind, our intelligence, that energy.
Right.
See, we need responsibility for that energy. Our creative intelligence, that is energy. We need to take responsibility for it and use it in a healthy way, which means with clarity and coherence, to think things out.
Right.
So we need to take responsibility. And that's the point that we're missing. See, just getting angry and trying to be the good guy and have good motives and good intentions, all right, that's not good enough. We're not bringing enough.
Right.
The energy has no intensity to it. It has no heart to it. So because everything is about energy, and this applies to our individual evolution and to our collective evolution. So I think we need to be thinking about responsibility. I think we need to think in terms of, look at ourselves and recognize ourselves and have an understanding with ourselves. How can I be a spiritual person? How can I support spirituality by any definition? Right? How can I do this if I don't respect my intelligence and show respect to my intelligence? How can I do this? How can I be this spiritual person? How can I be a respectful person if I don't show respect to my intelligence?
Right.
So, because if I have respect for the Creator, then I don't know how I can have respect for a Creator without having respect for my intelligence. And I don't know how I can I don't know how I can have respect for my intelligence. If what I'm doing is I'm beating myself up inside my head with all the negative self-images that someone else programmed into me.
Yeah. I agree, man. That's the medicine, John. That's the medicine.
So if we're going in the long run, because I think someone has had something to do an outcome of what's happening. So in the long run, we will decide. We will be an important influence on the outcome. But it's a decision we make it's a decision we have to make for what we represent. You know, and I think that individually, collectively, if we just can have this understanding about our intelligence and use it with clarity and coherence, use it to think.
Yeah.
Then we will create more positive solutions.
Hey, John, we only have a few minutes left here, and I don't really want to interrupt this amazing Dharma talk, but you've got a couple of gigs coming up in Northern California, right? You're back out doing music again. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, the part of the Hemp History Week where me and my band we're doing a show at the Broward Center in Berkeley, California, on Saturday night. And then on Sunday we're doing one at the Sunflower Center in Petaluma, California.
Well, that's Sunday night. This coming Sunday?
Yeah, this coming Sunday.
Okay. So we got the Broward Center.
Okay.
Broward Center.
The Broward Center
in Berkeley.
Yes. Saturday, the Broward Center in Berkeley. Sunday, the Sunflower Center in Petaluma.
Okay. Now, if you've never seen John live with Bad Dog, I highly recommend it. I've seen him 3 times. A very powerful, mesmerizing kind of experience. And John, I wanted to play this track because we don't have a lot of time left. We're probably going to fade out with the track. I managed to get the track that you and Stephen Kent did last week at the KPFA studios. Now, I wasn't able to download it. I was able to kind of download a little bit, but KPFA has locked up the stream, so I couldn't really convert it into an MP3. However, I have it loaded on my computer, and we're going to play it through the speakers here. It's not ideal, but I want to play this track that you and Stephen are doing, and it's probably going to go through to the end of the show. So I'm just going to let the track play and let it be kind of the soundtrack to the end of the show. Real quick, what do you want to say about it?
Well, the song, I call it In This Land, but it's about seed. And I'll let the song explain itself, but it's about seed. You know, life in a way is about energy. It's about seed. Energy comes from a seed. You know, it just seems to be that way. But it's about seed. Seed carries memory, you know, memory of life. So it's really a song about seed. And I've done a version of it with Kira Faye, with her singing traditional. And I've done a version of it with my band, and now I've done a version of it with Steve with this didgeridoo. So maybe it's a song I'll do with different musical versions. With Steve.
Okay. All right, John, hey, thank you for coming on the show today. Always really appreciate it. And have a great gig on Saturday and Sunday night. And if you're in the Bay Area or Northern California, go see John Trudell and Bad Dog. You will not regret it. Thanks again, John.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, man.
All right. Here we go. This is John Trudell and Stephen Kent together on Didgeridoo and Spoken Word.
In this land, wild seed, life seeding life, and the earth is our mother, and the land is her flesh, and the water is her milk, and the oil is her blood, and we are her children. In this land we come from, of this earth we're made of, with us as future ancestors, given response abilities to live. We are the future we bring. If we don't take care of the land, how can the land take care of us? Same with sky and air we breathe. It's time to remember tomorrow, today. In the reality, we reap what we sow. Reality of life and land is in the seed. Seed has memory, memory of life. Wild seed memory, keeping alive. Up close, face to face with the destroyers and their synthetic seed without memory. Toxic planting, poisons in earth and minds. Discarding well-being into maximizing profit. Abandoning the children to massive debt. Making the price of freedom unaffordable at the expense of the many to benefit the few. Like a spreading of mad human disease. Chaosing minds with liars' promises. Seeding old fear with new fear. Life in the world of the money man. We need to think our way out of what we believed our way into. How can we show respect to life if we don't use our common sense?
That was John Trudell and Stephen Kent live at the KPFA studios last week, performing together didgeridoo, spoken word, to the most fundamental and ancient voices on the planet, the human voice and the 40,000-year-old eucalyptus branch hollowed out by termites. It doesn't get more basic, fundamental, and organic than that. I want to thank John Trudell, Radchick, and also Sarah Nash, the Cosmic Hooker, for joining me today and joining you today. And together we were all here experiencing a lot of different interesting realities, all climbing together and hopefully creating something new and unique and positive out of the mix. This is Robert Phoenix. I'll be back on Monday with the mashup. And until then, you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. Have a great weekend. Stay sane. Much love. And keep it all positive. Here's Philip K. Dick. Adios.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.